Good evening and welcome to our 2018 Sault Ste. Marie Ward 5 debate. Tonight's debate is being held here in Shingwak Auditorium of Algoma University. We wish to acknowledge that we are on the lands of the Anishinaabe Nation, and we also acknowledge we are on sacred lands, and through the vision and leadership of Chief Shingwak, we are on trust land set aside for the purpose of education. My name is Jasmine Rowley, and I'm a video journalist with Sault Today, and I will be acting as the moderator for tonight's debate. As part of their ongoing commitment to our local community, Algoma University, Sault Today, and Shaw TV have partnered to present tonight's event. I would like to run through the format for tonight's debate. All candidates on the ballot for the October 22nd election were invited to take part tonight. The seating and question order for the candidates was decided by a random draw prior to tonight's broadcast. Similarly, questions and their order were decided before tonight's broadcast and prior to the candidates' draw, so the first respondent to each question will be based on luck of the draw. Questions were derived from public surveys administered by Sault Today. Questions will be posed tonight by students currently enrolled in political science courses here at Algoma University. Thank you to Logan Fresh, Alyssa Thompson, Alyssa Grondin, Liz Niche, and Jacob Beach for asking tonight's questions. Once a question has been posed, each candidate will have a 60-second response opportunity. This will be followed by a 30-second right of response from the initial respondent. With each new question, a different candidate will respond first. When you hear a warning chime, we ask that candidates wrap up in under 10 seconds. At the end of the 10 seconds, your mic will be turned off. I would like to remind all candidates of a few ground rules. Profanity and interrupting candidates who have the mic will not be tolerated. At any point, as moderator, I may request a candidate to stay on topic. At the outset of the debate, each candidate will have 90 seconds to provide opening remarks. At the end of our debate, each candidate will have 1 minute to provide closing remarks. We would like to thank and welcome the candidates who are joining us this evening, Mr. Frank Fata, Mr. Scott, Mr. Grandinetti, and Mr. Gardy. At this point, we invite opening remarks from our candidates. You each have 90 seconds. We will begin with Mr. Fata.
Thank you very much, Jasmine. My name is Frank Fata, and I'm once again running to be your Ward 5 City Councillor, full-time City Councillor here in Sault Ste. Marie. This is, by the way, just for the record, my last term if I'm successful. Anyway, I have my wife here, Pina, who's been my godsend during these past few terms, and I have 2 children that are both born educated here in Sault Ste. Marie and living in Sault Ste. Marie. So to me, I have a very vested interest in terms of what the future of Sault Ste. Marie holds, and I think we should all, everybody in this room and everybody watching, should be very, very concerned about the welfare of Sault Ste. Marie. And we certainly have a have a lot of things to be optimistic about, but I think that what we need on council, I think, is people that are experienced, people that are committed, people that have proven reliability, people that have a proven track record. I think that during my course on council, I've been very conservative-minded in terms of how I vote. I have a track record. I can't really avoid that. My reputation precedes me. So in terms of what I can say or do, basically my track record shows exactly what I've done these past few terms. People that I've talked to at the door seem to be very accepting of my approach on council. And I really plan to continue doing the same thing I've been doing all along. And I am very passionate during this election, very excited, and I look forward to the and for the results. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Matthew Scott.
Thank you first to Sault Today and to Shaw and to Algoma University for hosting. Going to introduce myself a little bit. So I was born and raised in Sault Ste. Marie, specifically in the West End in Ward 6, which is now Ward 5. It's a ward that I grew up in, I was raised in, I went to school in, and I'm deeply connected to the ward. The reason I want to run and the reason that I've heard at the doors is people want change. The city has been in the same situation over and over again, and we're looking to finally make some things happen. I'm hoping to bring some fresh ideas, some energy to City Council that might not necessarily be there anymore. When I'm going door to door and people are saying the same things over and over, it made me for sure know that that was the right choice to run. I'm not going to be one of those councillors that just runs, gets in, and does it all for himself. I want to consistently be there for the ward. I want to be there for the people. I'm going to make every effort I can for all 4 years to get out and consistently touch base. I would like to pledge myself to every citizen of Ward 5 that I will do my absolute best if chosen to represent them. I will listen to their needs and I will listen to their ideas and suggestions. And I think that I would be a very good choice for your Ward 5 City Councilor. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ozzie Grandinetti.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you all for coming. I stand here filled with gratitude to see so many of you here. I'm so lucky, and we are so lucky, to live in a city like this one. I want to thank Algoma University for offering this venue that has given me an opportunity to meet and talk with you. Thanks to all the many volunteers who organized this event. I have lived in the West End my entire life. Growing up, we didn't have much, but I was fortunate enough to grow up in a neighborhood that had public parks where I could play, a neighborhood rink where I could play hockey, and most importantly, public schools where I got a good education. That education formed me like it formed so many of you. It unlocked the possibilities of the world. It influenced how I think about the possibilities, not just the limitations, of the government throughout my life. Some people ask me why I'm running for council. It is because of my dedication and interest in improving the city that I'm running. I'm running for you, the people of Sault Ste. Marie, and not for the best interests of any organized group or any one person. I'm also raising a family here, and I want them to stay here, find work, and build their own families here. My wife, my 2 boys. I love Sault Ste. Marie, being close to nature, and being able to live in a quiet, safe rural setting. We are active in the community, in the schools, and in recreation programs so that we know firsthand what a great resources we have in the city. I am increasingly concerned about the decisions that are being made and concerned about the impact of pressures from all around us.
Thank you. Mr. Corey Gardy.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Thanks to Algoma University, Sault Ste. and Shaw Cable. I'm a graduate of Algoma University. I study political science here, so this is particularly cool for me. So thanks for doing what you're doing. I think, you know, as all of us are here and we're going to present our ideas, I think forums like this are important for us because we get to convey our message to you, but I think it's even more important for those of you who have come and those of you who are watching us. It allows us the opportunity to present our ideas, but it also allows you to compare and contrast the 4 of us. I want the residents of Ward 5 to know that I've heard them. We need to control truck traffic and slow it down. We need to make sure that our roads, ditches, and culverts are maintained, that property standards are enforced. We need to ensure that our community is as accessible as it can be. We need to spend responsibly at City Hall, and we also have to make sure that our community is safe. I believe that we need to be optimistic, that we need to look forward and not back. I plan to be a positive, to work in a positive manner with fellow colleagues and city staff. That's what I hope to convey to you here this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. We now invite the first question to our Ward 5 candidates.
Ward 5 is a largely rural ward. What will you do to ensure residents of Ward 5 enjoy the same quality services and infrastructure as the rest of Sault Ste. Marie?
And we start with you, Mr. Fata.
For the question, I'll answer that in a very clear, concise way. As a full-time counselor, first of all, as a full-time counselor. This morning at 1 a.m., I was dealing with a constituent who was very distressed. They had backup sewer, they had flooding in their basement. I was on that at 1 a.m. 9 a.m. this morning, I was contacting city staff. I was dealing with the issue. I got a hold of the city rep. By about 1 in the afternoon, he had everything under control. Our staff was going there, dealing with the issue. There was 3 or 4 properties that were involved in that situation. They were being dealt with this afternoon. By being on it early this morning and very early this morning, and then of course during the day when city staff is able to respond, is the kind of things that I will present, and I have been presenting as a full-time counselor.
Thank you. Mr. Scott.
Considering I live in Ward 5 and I'm part of the rural area of Ward 5, I know exactly where this question is coming from, and I would ensure everybody that lives in the area, and these people are my neighbors, that they would get the exact same service they expect. Considering our taxes out there for the service level, I want to make sure that people get their value for those taxes. I want to ensure that myself included, would have the same service expected anywhere else in the city. I know it is a big ward, but much like Mr. Fata, I can guarantee that I would have a prompt response and I would make sure to resolve any issues that anyone's having.
Thank you. Mr. Grandinetti.
I like Mr. Fata, last night received many phone calls because of the flooding around our area. And I would like to thank city staff for being out and taking good care of the citizens of Ward 5 and Sault Ste. Marie. I think that it's not just the city, the Board of Works, I think they do a good job in taking care of the services and whatnot, and I believe they could do it without increasing taxes. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gardy.
There's no reason for anyone in the ward to expect less service based on where they live. And I've, like many of us, I'm sure, have gone door to door, and I've listened to what people have had to say. And many of the issues and the concerns are similar, whether you live in Bayview, or you live out at Sunnyside, or you live up on 4th Line, or anywhere in between. For example, I'll speak to Sunnyside. I spoke to a number of people while going door to door out at Sunnyside. They have a concern about their ability to get up the hill that leads to Sunnyside in the wintertime. They have concerns around their ditches and their culverts. On Atwater, they had concerns about the road being cleared in the winter and making sure that some of the ditches work properly, just like they did in Chippewa. I think we have to be attentive to everyone, regardless of where they live, and service them just like everybody else. The taxes they pay should get the services that they require, regardless of where they're located.
Thank you. We will now give a 30-second right of response to Mr. Fata.
Again, simple, logical. If someone calls me at 9 a.m., has an issue on Sunnyside Beach or where the top end of Old Bay Road, they call me 9 o'clock, I could be at their property by 9:30 that very morning. Dealing with staff, because during the day, staff is available. Come 4:30 in the afternoon, they're not available. You've got to be able to deal with these issues, and people expect that. I know what people in the far end of the city expect. I know what they've gotten in the past with Frank Manzo.
Thank you. We now invite our second question to the candidates.
What is your vision with regard to the taxes and fees individuals, businesses, and property owners now pay in Sault Ste. Marie?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Right.
Sorry.
What is your vision with regard to the taxes and fees individuals, businesses, and property owners now pay in Sault Ste. Marie?
Yeah, absolutely. So I know it's a pretty hot topic right now in the news about how much small businesses are paying in Sault Ste. Marie for taxes. And I think that's a pretty big deterrent for new businesses opening here. So I think for small businesses, we could potentially look at offering incentives to help mitigate those tax costs. I know that taxes as a whole, property taxes, people often complain. That's one of the #1 complaints you get at the door. And one surefire way to reduce taxes is obviously to increase your tax base. So how else do we do that? But aside from keeping people here, bringing people back into the city, and as well, one thing that I want to absolutely take care of if I do get in, and that's to comb right through the budget. And I understand we have things that we can't cut, but there are areas where we could be more efficient and reduce costs or even cut something right out. I don't believe in cutting jobs if that's the way to go. Maybe not replacing them, losing jobs through attrition is a good option, but there are definitely ways to help mitigate that.
Thank you. Mr. Grandinetti.
Thank you. I personally think our taxes and fees are very high for a community that we live in. Our industrial taxes are going up roughly 60%, which I think is going to kill jobs, on top of the high electricity costs, the electricity rates we pay. As for fees, the permit fees, we're one of the only municipalities in Ontario that you have to get a permit just to do basic improvements on your house, roofing, siding, soften and fascia. And the excuse from the building department is that we don't have a development charge. And I disagree with them, because I contacted 8 municipalities within the province. 4 of them have development charges, 4 of them don't. And out of the 4 that have them, they told me a development charge is a tax and has nothing to do with building permits. And I will also work hard to lower the fees that the last council had imposed upon us, the people of Sault Ste. Marie. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gardy.
The current council and mayor have done a decent job in making sure they're spending responsibly. I think they've looked at the budget earlier and more thoroughly than they have in the past. There's improvements to be made there. I think we have to be very cautious, though, and we need a balanced approach. We can look for efficiencies and be to be fiscally responsible, but we can't. We got to make sure that the services that people rely on aren't affected, especially some of the older people in our community, because I've heard a lot from a lot of the older people in our community. We need to broaden our tax base. We need to develop an economy of the future. We have to jump into the 21st century as we're 20 years in. We need an economy based on knowledge, on tech jobs. I agree with Ozzy. We have to look at some of the fees that people are paying, but it's all part of a balanced approach.
Thank you. Mr. Fata.
Thank you. No matter how you view this thing, one thing that you have to realize is that the tax base, the assessment, the amount of assessment and taxable dollars that we're going to have to try to bring to this city has to take place. If we don't bring in new assessment growth, and that has to come from these sectors of industrial, manufacturing, then commercial, and then of course residential. I call it trickle-down economics. If you don't start at the upper level, then you cannot see the growth where people will start their families, build a brand new house, cause the economy to increase that way. We do need to do efficiencies. Yes, absolutely. I have been very public about this. I think that we have to look at City Hall, the way City Hall operates. There's been a few of us that have been very vocal about this in the past, but we haven't gotten the support from the rest of the council. We have to look for efficiencies at City Hall through attrition, and then I think that's something that we have to look at.
Thank you.
As far as user fees, again, same thing.
Thank you. We're out of time. We will now move on to your 30-second right of response, Mr. Scott.
Yeah, so I didn't really get to touch on fees the first time, but my wife and I actually built our home, and I know exactly what Ozzy's talking about. There are fees left and right, and we really got to rein these in. You shouldn't need to pay a fee to replace a window if you're not doing anything structural. It just doesn't make sense. There's no way that we rely on that kind of money, and maybe taking a look at the building department and seeing where we could save some money there too.
Thank you. Our next question, please.
What will you do to help improve Sault Ste. Marie's economy, create more jobs, and make this city an attractive place to do business? And
we start with you, Mr. Grandinetti.
For one thing, we have to cut some of the red tape that goes along with trying to rezone and develop some property. Also, I would like to see lowering taxes so that we could bring the economy in, bring businesses in. And one of the biggest things that I think we have to do is get away from a one-horse town, offer different types of opportunities for different types of businesses to come into, so that we're not based on one-horse town, because that industry is so up and down, and it just seems to ruin the economy as it cycles through. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gertie.
So I think, and I hope to touch on this later, but I think with the restructuring of Algoma, I'm hopeful we're going to settle that soon. We need to focus, as I mentioned again, on a technology of an economy of the future. We need to have our post-secondary institutions working closely with our businesses and our entrepreneurs. I think we're well positioned. I think Council made a wise decision in streamlining economic development and taking control of some of those dollars to direct economic development. I think we have to continue to work on an immigration strategy to get people here. We need them. Despite what others say, we need people here in the future for our community to succeed. I think we have to work closely with some of our neighboring communities, including Batchewana and Garden River, on the environment, on some tourism opportunities. There's a lot to be had, but we have to have new ideas to do it.
Thank you. Mr. Fata.
First thing that we don't need is to have more studies and more consultants studying this city to death. We've got the Economic Development Corporation. We give them over $1 million a year. We got the Innovation Center. We give them over $277,000 a year. And on top of that, we gave the Innovation Center $750,000 over 3 years. And why do we do that? Because they are the people that are the responsible, professional people that are there to create jobs, create new opportunities in Sault Ste. Marie. If these places, and they've been working at it, and there's been success, but we have to continue to stress the importance of what they're doing and to make sure that they are successful. Because if it's money badly spent, then we got to divert that money elsewhere and make sure that it's spent in a way that gets the best results. We need to keep our youth in Sault Ste. Marie. And if we don't really get serious about this and stop spending money on consultants and fees, it will go on forever. And
Thank you. Mr. Scott.
Similar to what actually Mr. Fado was saying, he's absolutely right. There's a lot of smart people in Sault Ste. Marie. We pay these people lots of money to do their job, and this is their job. Between the EDC and all the other different initiatives that we have going on, we should be able to use those resources, and as well as the universities, to kind of work together and help stimulate the economy in the Soo. I think as well, to attract some people, we have a beautiful waterfront, we have beautiful nature places up north, you can go fishing, hunting, anything you need to do. We have all the natural resources in the world in Sault Ste. Marie. We should be able to attract people here. The problem is there's lack of jobs, lack of quality jobs. So I think once we get that going, we have a lot going for us, and there's a lot of potential there for the city to work together with all the resources that we do have, and that's something I would look forward to doing as your councillor.
Thank you. We will now give a 30-second right of response to Mr. Grandinetti.
Thank you. The other three candidates have some good points. I also think that we should go after every opportunity we can, whether it's one job or 100 jobs. Councillor Shoemaker and I went after Amazon, and we knew the odds of getting it, we probably got a better chance of winning Lotto Max, but we tried. And I also think we should look at, like Mr. Gardy said, jobs of the future, whether it's technology, manufacturing, robotics. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question, please.
What is your position on Sault Ste. Marie's bid for a ferrochrome smelter? What are the economic benefits and environmental and health risks?
It's a good question. There's been a lot of talk about the good work the council and the mayor has done to secure us, or to get us to the final two, to secure the ferrochrome processor. It's, from what I understand, near $1 billion project. The benefits are obvious. The construction of it, the jobs that would come after it. It's some time off in the future. Let's not kid ourselves. But we also have to be conscious of the environmental risks of the ferrochrome processing facility. From what I know, the next stage, as we pursue this, is going to be a thorough consultation with the community. In fact, Noront insists upon it. And we have to see what the community says. And do the environmental risks outweigh the economic benefit from it? I hope that it does, because it's much needed, and they're good jobs.
Thank you. Mr. Fada.
Thank you. Very good question. Am I in favor of the ferrochrome plant? Absolutely. Am I concerned about the environmental aspects that have to be looked at? Of course. We have the people in place who are going to make sure that those are done. We have to be very, very cautious. The point also that has to be made here is, and I'm just thinking as Corey was just saying, the environmental seems to, in many ways, create a roadblock to the economy in this country. And we got a pipeline that looks like it will never be developed. Why? Because the environmental is creating roadblocks after roadblocks, and it's just not the way I see things, not the way things should be done. We got the Energy East pipeline. It got stopped. Those are thousands and thousands of jobs. Millions of taxpayer dollars that would be received. But what are we doing? We're letting the environment control everything in this country. A country that produces a fraction of the actual.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Scott.
So the economic benefits of the ferrochrome plant are pretty obvious. It would bring lots of jobs for a long time to Sault Ste. Marie, which is fantastic. I think it would help. It doesn't diversify us too much, but that's okay because, like Ozzy had said prior, any job is going to be good. The environmental side of it, I'm not as concerned about, simply because we've come light years from when we first constructed something like the steel plant. We understand the environment more now than ever before. So this is something that we can absolutely do everything in our power to mitigate any long-term environmental effects. I can't say that we would be 100% because we don't know what things are going to be in the future, but we can say that they're not just going to put it up. There are regulations they're going to have to follow. It's definitely worth taking it in for the economic benefit of the city.
Thank you. Mr. Grandinetti.
Thank you. As most people know, I'm pro-development and pro-jobs. I do support this initiative and this big project, but as Mr. Gardy says, we're many years away from developing the ferrochrome plant. My biggest concern with this is the environment. If you guys Google this, the environmental impact within our environment from this facility is horrendous. But I hope by then the technology will be out there that we will have very little emissions that come out of the stacks from this facility. And like I said earlier, I'm for all the jobs, but we got to do the environmental assessment first. Thank you.
Thank you. You now have a 30-second right of response, Mr. Gardy.
It's a sensitive issue because as I speak to people who live in Bayview and I speak to people who live in Brookfield, they talk about already the particulate matter that settles on their cars and settles on their homes, and they can't keep their windows open for very long. You hear it a lot. I think you guys probably heard it. So we have to be conscious. If we want to be an attractive community for people to come to, we have to consider the environmental impacts of this. I believe that technology will allow it to be as clean as it needs to moving forward.
Thank you. We now invite our next question.
What are your priorities for enhancing recreational opportunities for people of all ages in your ward to keep them active, healthy, and happy?
Mr. Fata.
Yeah, that's a very important topic. Is being in the westerlymost end of the city. Of course, we are away from the sort of the central area as far as downtown, the GFL Memorial Gardens and so forth. We have to look at and try and encourage some kind of development in the West End. Now, the new rink that we're looking at the West End. West End Community Center is certainly important. That rink has to be replaced. It's not a question of whether if it should or not. It has to be replaced. Now, whether we're going to be looking at a twin pad arena, that's something that we have to look at. The place has been designed to have a indoor pool like the John Road Center. People have asked about that. I know it's something that may be far-reaching at this moment, but with the type of government funding that's available, it's something that we have to look at. Now, the Mike Zook Center was also mentioned again as far as the rink. It's something that we have to possibly look at. Hopefully, we will.
Thank you, Mr. Scott.
So, having grown up in the West End, this was often something that I ran into as a child. We used to try our best. We would go play at Bayview Public School. They had basketball courts. Those are no longer. The park equipment, it's still there, but it's not great. We used to have a rink, Mike Zook rink. It's no longer there. So I've been telling people, because this is a concern for people in the area, and I've been telling them at the door, these are things that I do want to bring back to the West End. Not necessarily the basketball courts, because that's now been converted, but definitely the outdoor rink, because that was one of the best rinks I found in the city. There's a ton of younger people in the area now. It's just not feasible for some of them to get to Merrifield. So that's one potential option. And given the increase in popularity of disc golf, we now have a disc golf course. It's located a little more central, so maybe looking at something like that. The West End has tons of beautiful open space. We could do some trails. I know Mr. Gardy wants to do an extension of the Hub Trail. That's a great idea as well.
Thank you. Mr. Grandinetti.
Thank you. I think it's incredibly important and vibrant to a healthy community. I, like the other two gentlemen to my side, Mr. Scott and Mr. Fata, would like to see either the McMeekin Center refurbished or a twin or single ice pad at the Northern Community Center, and possibly a swimming pool. I would also like to see an outdoor rink, and if the City Board of Works won't give us one, I would like to work with some of the schools, one or two of the schools, and possibly build a rink at the schools and get the kids involved and get them some real life skills. Because as we all grew up, I don't know about this young gentleman sitting to my right here, every school at one time used to have a hockey rink, and most of the parks used to have splash pads as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gardy.
Yeah, so I believe over the course of the next 4 years that the hub trail needs to be extended beyond its westerly terminus at Carmen's Way. There's no reason that neighborhoods in our end of the community shouldn't have access to it. I believe that the McMeekin Center, something needs to get done there. There's no question. I've spoken to people in Bayview about the Bayview rink. It should be there. There isn't a gentleman that did more for hockey in this community than Mr. Zook, and it was a terrible thing to take it down. We need to repurpose some of our parks. I think everybody would agree that some of our parks aren't being utilized to the degree that they are, or they should be, or they used to be. And I think repurposing part or some of those parks for different recreational activities is a good idea. Thank you.
Thank you. You now have a 30-second right of response, Mr. Fata.
Yeah. One thing that I think really bothers me is that the people in the West End generally over the years have always felt like they were shortchanged. And this is something that we have to be very clear about, and we have to work aggressively to deal with and to help these people. We have to try and have town hall meetings. My current councillor, a friend of mine, have done that. We have had town hall meetings. We have to listen to the people. We have to know what they want. And if we do that, I think that we'll get some good answers and then good things to look forward to pushing ahead.
Thank you. We'll have our next question.
What will you do to help ensure good, accountable governance on City Council?
Mr. Scott.
Aside from just kind of doing my best to do it, I mean, you've got to lead by example. You've got to call people out when they're doing wrong. And ultimately what it comes down to is the only judgment you're going to have as a councillor is from the people. So as long as I'm doing a job that's sufficient enough for them, and I will meet with them frequently, I will meet with people of the ward to make sure I'm doing a good enough job, and I will adapt based on how they respond to either my job, and I'll try to influence the other councillors as well.
Thank you. Mr. Grandinetti.
I think that we should all be held accountable for what we do, and I'll make this brief and get a hold of your constituent right away. Councillor Fata says he'll be there within a half hour. All the power to him, he's retired. I think within a couple hours, get a hold of the constituent that calls for, depends on what the complaint is, within a couple hours, and have the issue taken care of. Thank you.
Mr. Gardy.
I wanted to provide responsible and reliable representation to the West End. I think that someone who's in a position of a city councillor needs to be positive all the time. I think you need to work collegially with the people at City Hall, the city staff, and respect them. I think you need to respect your fellow councillors. I think you have to be accountable to your constituents, and I will be. I think you need to be in touch with them in between elections. I think you have to limit in-camera meetings at City Council. And you have to make as many meetings as you can public, so the public can come and witness what's going on and provide the necessary input. There's nothing more important in governance than being responsible and being accountable, and I pledge to be both to the people of Ward 5 and the community at large.
Thank you. Mr. Fata.
One key word that really summarizes everything on this topic is respect. There's got to be respect amongst us, amongst the peers. There's got to be respect for the taxpayer, for the homeowner. That has to be paramount. The Integrity Commissioner that has now been set up will be overriding anything that goes on and overseeing it, and to make sure that everything that's done in terms of how our dealings on council, in terms of dealing towards each other and so forth. A couple of years ago, I had one councillor have his fist in my face, and all because I voted against something that he was in favor of. That, if we had that happen today, there would be something done about it. Back then, there was no recourses, and as a result, nothing happened. You have to stand up for what you believe in, but you have to respect each other during the course of your work on council.
Thank you. We will now have a 30-second right of response from Mr. Scott.
Absolutely. So I've been guaranteeing people at the door as well of my accountability. I've been letting everybody know that they'll be able to rely on me. If you call me, you will hear back from me, or I will answer it. If you have any issues whatsoever, I will meet with people. I will continue to keep my finger on the pulse of the ward. It's an area I live in. These are my neighbors. I see them. And that's exactly what I'm guaranteeing everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question, please.
To get around the city, cars, trucks, buses, and bicycles need good roads. What are your planning priorities for the city's roadways? And further, what will you do to improve public transit?
Can you ask the question again, please? Sorry.
Yeah.
I didn't get the first part of it.
So it's to get around the city, cars, trucks, buses, and bicycles need good roads. What are your planning priorities for the city's roadways? And further, what will you do to improve public transit?
Okay, as most people know, my wife and I are avid cyclists, and I've been saying this for years. What I would like to see happen with the city roadways is when they construct or reconstruct a roadway is pretty much eliminate the boulevard and do wider, the curb lane go a little bit wider so the person riding the bicycle has a wider lane. And then as for transit, I would like most municipalities, most of the big municipalities around the world are going to ride-sharing programs, kind of like Uber. Arlington, Texas is going that way. London, England, Innisfil, they're saving millions and millions of dollars doing this, and Brampton is the next one. It's more efficient and it's cost savings on the taxpayer. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gardy.
I think we need to further develop more bike lanes in and around the community. I think we need to develop more multi-use, non-motorized trails in and around the community, because that addresses accessibility and equity. Not everyone drives. Some people need to get around by other means, and we should have those trails and lanes dedicated to them. You know, there's been some talk about transit. There's been an optimization. We need to further improve it, because transit and all of these different things that we're speaking about lead to economic opportunity for people. They get people back and forth to jobs. They get people out shopping. They get people to necessary healthcare appointments. And one traffic issue in the West End that hasn't been dealt with for many years is how quickly truck traffic is moving down some of the main corridors. I want the people to know that I am going to work to slow down truck traffic in the West End of this community.
Thank you. Mr. Fata.
Thank you. Yeah, very good question and very important question. Yeah, the issue about roads is an ongoing thing, but when I talked to engineering recently about that, the response was, we need more of this. So you just find more of this, and then we can deal with these priorities. Case in point, Allenside Road. It's a street that has to be looked at. There's speed on that road. There's trucks, heavy trucks driving fast. It has to be addressed. We have to push for that. In terms of the transit situation, we have an ongoing problem as far as transit. We have to deal with it. Too many concerns out there. People that can't get to the bus stop. One lady has to walk about 2 blocks in an area where there's no shelter, which is something that we have to address, and they have to wait there for the bus, and things that they didn't have to do a short time ago. I know the city is getting a little bit more widespread, so I know it becomes more of a challenge for our transit system, but we have to find a way to cater to as many people as possible, and priorities. It comes. We have to make sure.
Thank you. Mr. Scotland.
Yeah, so public transit actually in Sault Ste. Marie isn't the greatest. It's made improvements. It has been made a little bit better, but I know that there's concerns from some of the people I've spoken to about if they're working late, they can't necessarily take the bus, or things like they may have to walk to get to a bus stop, and that's just not right to me. I think that going toward a ride-sharing program is a great idea. I think beyond just public transit as well, if we're speaking transit as a whole, let's let Uber in. I really think that that's something we got to do. It's 2018. Beyond that as well, active fitness, like active transportation, like bike lanes, perfect. Let's do it. Like Ozzy said, every time we make a road, make it a little wider for that bike lane. We need things like that. It helps the community. It's good for public health. People like it. And I think that would help draw in some of the younger people, maybe make them stay as well. These are offerings we don't really have aside from one main road. And there's a lot of improvements that we could do, and I have a lot more ideas about this.
Thank you. You now have a 30-second right of response, Mr. Grananetti.
Thank you. Both Mr. Gardy and Mr. Fata alluded to the speeding trucks on Allenside Road. Well, we called the police. There's a police presence there for about a week or two. The trucks slowed down, and as soon as they're gone, they all call each other. The speeds are back up. Can we do something to improve it? I think so. The other thing that I think we should do with the roads is quit building roads that we don't need, and let's fix what we have. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question, please.
What will you do to help improve public safety and crime prevention in your ward and across Sault Ste. Marie?
And that's you, Mr. Gardy. Yep.
Well, there has been a rise in crime. I think all of us know that a lot of it stems from the drug problem and drug use. I think the new chief has a strategy that the police service has bought into. I think they're making some headway. I trust that they're going to make more. What we need to do, though, is we need to continue to focus on the opioid and drug problem in the community. It's multifaceted. We need to deal with the societal issues that cause people to go down that path. We need to make sure that people who are rehabilitated don't relapse, and we need to educate people. And it's going to take a full court press by every agency and organization involved, the school boards, the post-secondary institutions, Algoma Public Health, Group Health Center, Sault Ste. Marie Medical Association, representatives from the Provincial Pharmacists Association, the DSAB, the police service, emergency medical responders. We need to get this under control. We could be a leader in it, and I want to support that effort.
Thank you. Mr. Fata.
Recently, I met with the new police chief, Chief Stevenson. He is very, very proactive. I find it amazing how he responds. I email him, he gets back to me within a half hour. We dealt with an issue of somebody hanging around a bus stop talking to small kids. I emailed him, he got back to me within about 15 minutes, and he was on it. He was on that item, and he talked to the grandparent that brought it forward. Within a half hour, I was talking to him, everything was being resolved. Again, middle of the day, all things are being handled, and there's very, very positive results from it. Recently, we met in regards to a crack house. They call it a crack house. Maybe it's a drug house, whatever you want to call it. It's been sitting there operating in that western end of the city. I talked to the chief. He was on top of it right after I talked to him. That's what we need in this city. We got a very proactive police chief. That's what we need to do.
Thank you. Mr. Scott.
Yeah, so I come from a background of data analysis, and I think that we can use the current data that we do collect, maybe enhance that to focus and step up police presence in the areas that are higher known for crimes. We can base it around that. Data does tell us a lot. So increasing police presence is one big thing, and like Mr. Fata said, I think the new police chief is very proactive in this type of thing, so that's perfect. I would work well with him to get this going. It is a concern that many people express to me in the ward. A lot of it could stem from the economic as well as the opioid crisis. In speaking with a pharmacist friend of mine, he was telling me that in Ontario, we have one of the best actual responses for the medication, for methadone and such. It's the social services that we're lacking. So I think that we could step up in the social services, and that would help. It is very multifaceted, but we could start looking there.
Thank you. Mr. Grandinetti.
The first thing I think we should do is increase police presence. And I also think we should lobby the provincial and federal governments to have harsher penalties for these people that commit these crimes. I also think we should have uniformed and plainclothes officers on patrol, whether it be on bicycles or in unmarked cars. One other thing I believe in is they should eliminate carding. If you speak to most police officers, when they see a group of kids on bicycles, whatever time of night it is, they can't go ask them what they're doing. Even though they got duffel bags full of whatever, unless someone pinpoints them to them breaking into a vehicle, those police officers are not allowed to ask those kids what to do. The other thing is we should all get to know our neighbors and possibly set up a neighborhood watch. Thank you.
Thank you. And you now have a 30-second right of response, Mr. Gardy.
Mr. Grandinetti has a good idea with the neighborhood watch. I think for all the work that the new chief is doing and getting officers back on the street to deal with these issues, we can't forget about community policing and building relationships with residents and the police service. I think what's going down on Gore Street is a good example. What's happening now at the mall. These are some of the efforts that we can pursue along with the enforcement of the police presence. Thank you.
Thank you. We now invite to the next question.
What will you do to help protect and enhance Sault Ste. Marie's natural environment, so it's air, water, and land?
And that's you, Mr. Fata.
Wow. Yeah, that's a good question. I mean that's important. Obviously, it's important, but in terms of the environmental, it's something that we can't simply set it aside and say it's something that the experts will deal with. I mean, we as councillors have to be proactive also. We just can't ignore anything. I'm a believer, and I've always been a believer, that I listen to people. When I go to the door, I've talked to many people during these past several weeks, a lot of people that are a lot smarter than the people on council, and I've encouraged them. I've said to these people, I says, I know that you're a busy person, but you are obviously very, very well versed. And these are the kind of people that can give me information. I think it's important. There's people that are constantly emailing us, that are giving us their suggestions. People that are experts, people that just know more about these things than we do. It's important for us to listen. If we do nothing else, we listen, we respect their opinion, and we make sure that we follow through on it. That's important to me.
Thank you. Mr. Scott.
Right, so I think we do need to protect the environment. I know that I said the ferrochrome plant is important, but also that's because I trust that we've come far enough along to mitigate any major risks. We do only have one environment, and I think that as long as council is proactive about making sure that they understand and talking with the experts in regards to everything that could impact the environment. So that's one way to protect it. Enhancing it, as I think we could focus on having our green spaces either expanded or made sure that we preserve them. I know there's tons of, especially in Ward 5, areas where it's just beautiful, beautiful open space that we could have a trail through, things like that. As long as we're protecting those areas within reason, I think that's one of the natural beauties of Sault Ste. Marie. We're surrounded by water, trees, nature. Let's use it.
I think, and I've said this before, is we should lobby the federal and provincial government to go after the big industry, and we should also be careful at what types of they allow into our community as to what type of emissions. As we all know, we have a very high cancer rate within our community, and we don't have to allow any business within the community that omits emissions with a lot of carcinogens and pollutes the air. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garvey.
I think we have to look at alternative transportation methods, as we've talked about. We need to optimize public transit. We have to have bike lanes. We have to have multi-use paths. We have to make sure that the buildings that are built residentially and commercially are as energy efficient as they can be. We have to encourage people to spend more time in our conservation areas so they have a reminder of how beautiful a place we live in. I think, considering our location, we need to be at the forefront of protecting the Great Lakes in any effort to do so. I think our post-secondary institutions should focus on fresh water. They should be programming around it, study and research, because I think it's a key area for study in the future and a valuable resource. And I think we could learn a lot from our neighboring communities of Batchewana and Garden River when it comes to environmental sustainability and appreciating the environment.
Thank you. You now have a 30-second right of response. Mr. Fata.
Again, the important thing that us as councillors is that we listen, that we appreciate what's being said there, and we are very proactive, very supportive. Now, Algoma has once a year, they have a meeting where they show the public, and I've gone to most of those events. They're showing the public what they're doing at Algoma in terms of the environment, in terms of making things better for Sault Ste. Marie. They're spending thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, and I've seen that. I think that's an example of things that are going in the right direction.
Thank you. Next question, please.
What will you do to ensure a reasonable minimum standard of living for people in your ward, including income security, access to affordable quality housing, and food security?
Yeah, so in Ward 5, actually, speaking of the access to affordable housing, I went to Bayview Public School. It's now being converted into elderly retirement style homes. So that's a great step in that direction. Recently, I did meet with Mike Delfrey from United Way. They just started, actually today was their big kickoff. They just started a program up at the Old Croatian Hall in regards to food security, which He walked me through it. I didn't realize how big of an issue it truly was in the city. It was a fantastic incentive. They've already gotten 14,000 pounds of donated food, and they've been only open since July. So I think working together with his program and working together with others in the city is a good step for creating that food security, as well as opening up more affordable homes. The West End, like I've been saying, has tons of areas. It's a beautiful, beautiful place to the city, and I think the neighborhoods would be very open and welcoming to something like that.
Thank you. Mr. Grandinetti?
Again, like I've said many times before, we should lobby the federal and provincial government for some funding to build affordable housing. I think what we should do is require developers who build large buildings is have a percentage of the building, have a percentage of the units in the building affordable housing, whether it be 10%, 20% of the units in the building affordable housing. What some municipalities are doing around North America are they're incorporating, they're having students and seniors incorporated and small young families within the same building. And it's affordable housing for them, but what the young families have to do, they have to help out the seniors with it, volunteer with the seniors within the building, so they dock it off their rent. And as for the building, the reason why a lot of these buildings are so expensive now and rent is so high is the construction costs are very high now. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gardy?
So we have to be sensitive to our demographic. I'm going to say it over and over. There are some older people in our community who over the course of the next few years to several years are going to transition to more practical dwellings. We have to promote that type of development, and we would all welcome them in the West End. In terms of social housing, the federal government finally essentially has a national housing strategy. We have to work through our MP Terry Sheehan to secure the dollars that we need to add to the complement of social housing that we have and to improve what we currently have. Food security, we need to work with local growers and producers. There's been some talk about greenhouses locally. I think that's interesting. I think some of our parks can be repurposed into community gardens. And I think we need to work with the United Way and Salvation Army and those agencies, as Mr. Scott mentioned, that battle this on a daily basis. And we need to make our community as accessible as we can be because it leads to economic opportunity for several people. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Fata?
Yeah, I'd just like to make note that the comment was made about the Croatian Hall. Mike Delfrey over there, who's overseeing the operation over there, I was there this afternoon for the sort of grand opening, and some very good conversation going on there, and this place will serve a very, very, very useful purpose in terms of combating poverty here in Sault Ste. Marie. Mike Nadeau over at the social services, again, he's a real supporter, a real champion when it comes to supporting issues that have to do with low income, whether it's a housing issue. He is on top of that. He is an excellent individual. He's been around for several years now in Sault Ste. Marie. He was brought in, by the way, from out of town. Really, really good guy. Jobs, I think, jobs are the main way that we're going to solve these issues. We can't keep saying social this, social that, give them this, give them that. If we create jobs, we create independence, we create a sense of worth, a sense of satisfaction. That is the key word.
You now have a 30-second right of response, Mr. Scott.
Mr. Fata was just saying, when I did speak with Mike, he said that was the approach they were going to take at the United Way, was people would be able to do work there, and by working, they'd be able to get extra food that they would normally not get. So it's working hand in hand. It's helping somebody when they're down. It's giving them life skills that they can then adapt, and they can network. I think that's a very great idea, similar to what Mr. Grandinetti was saying with the housing, pairing the young with the old. It's fantastic, and I think that the city has a lot of potential there. So I think that's something that I would definitely work on.
Thank you, and thank you for your questions. At this point, we invite closing remarks from our candidates. You will each have 1 minute, and we will begin with Mr. Ozzie Grandinetti.
Oh. I thought we're starting with Mr. Fata. I would like to thank my fellow candidates and organizers for providing us with this opportunity. Thank you, everyone, for listening to all of us this evening. I care about the future prosperity of Sault Ste. Marie, and I look forward to continuing to work for you as a councillor. I will work towards lowering taxes and eliminating fees so that the residents can continue to afford to live and do business within our city. I will continue to support the existing industries and businesses and welcome new business developments in all sectors, including our downtown and post-secondary institutions. I will be accountable to you. I will return your calls, meet with you, and work hard to bring forward the issues you want addressed at City Council. As your elected official, I will continue to advocate on behalf of the residents of Ward 5 as well as the residents throughout the city. So looking forward to the election on October 22nd, I would like to leave you with this thought. The decisions the new council will be making will have long-term consequences for Sault Ste. Marie. This is a pivotal point in time to our community. Sault Ste. Marie should be a leader for other municipalities. We should be the benchmark for great government, great community living, and great business. Let's work together.
Thank you. On to Mr. Corey Gardy.
Conversations I've had with the hundreds of residents that I've spoken to in Ward 5 have informed me. For all the people that live on Gooley Avenue and Wallace Terrace and Allen Side Road, and I'm going to work with you, we're going to slow down truck traffic. For the people on Chippewa and Glasgow who spoke to me about their ditches and them not doing the work that they need to do, we're going to improve that infrastructure. I'm going to work hard to do that for you. For the people on 2nd Avenue and 3rd Avenue and on Letcher Street and on Brookfield who want property standards maintained, we're going to do that together. I'm going to work hard for you. But I can't do it by myself. I need your support. And I'm asking for your vote on October 22nd for responsible and reliable representation. That's what I want to provide to you and a new, strong voice at City Hall. Please vote for Corey Gardy on October 22nd. Thank you.
Thank you. On to you, Mr. Frank Fata.
Thank you. I am honored and proud to have served you on City Council for several terms. I have been a full-time representative of the people. I have been respectful of my duties, responded to you in a reasonable time, and have taken nothing for granted. You deserve someone who continues to give you that kind of attention, well, once again, the kind that you have received in the recent past from my good friend and colleague of many years, Frank Manzo. You should have and would continue to receive from me transparency, respect, accountability, and a common sense approach, along with experience on City Council that includes my willing to ask the tough questions that helps to bring about decisions that are in the best interest of all of us. But keeping in mind that your voice matters to me, and when you have asked me to bring something forward, I have always tried to oblige. Thank you for your time. Thank you for believing in me in the past. And all I can do is humbly ask you for continued support on Monday, October 22nd. Thank you, grazie, merci to each and every one of you, and especially to my wife, Pina, who without her, I wouldn't be here serving after several terms, and I'm hoping that for all you've done for me.
Thank you. And Mr. Matthew Scott.
Although this is only about an hour of your time tonight, I appreciate you either tuning in, watching online, or here live. I hope that I gave you a little bit of an example of the kind of person that I'll be as your Ward 5 City Councilor. I'm hoping to represent you every day, morning or night, it doesn't matter. I will be there. I will promise that you will get the voice that you need in City Hall. I will fight for every issue that you have. I will work with you to get anything, any ideas out there that you may want. And I can promise one thing to every single person that's voting on October 22nd, that if you do vote for me, you will not regret the choice because you will have the proper representation for all 4 years that you've so sorely lacked in Ward 5. Thank you.
Thank you. On behalf of Algoma University, Sue Today, and Shaw TV, I would like to thank our candidates for taking part in this debate this evening. We wish each of you the best in the remaining campaign period. I would like to thank the partners who presented this evening's debate, Shaw TV and its staff and volunteers who are here to televise tonight's debate, Sue Today for helping to organize the debate, collecting questions from the public, and streaming tonight's event online. Algoma University for hosting the debate, and its students of political science for asking the questions for us this evening. Thank you to Mio's Furniture Fashions for supplying the stage furniture for us. And finally, we would like to thank everyone here in Shingwalk Auditorium at Algoma University and those viewing at home for joining us this evening. We hope that this discussion has helped better inform you about each of the candidates and their respective platforms. We encourage all eligible voters to exercise their democratic right on October 22nd and have their voices heard in Sault Ste. Marie's municipal election. Thank you and good night.